Hello, and welcome back to Embodying Mystical Mac. I'm Mac, and if you're new here, thank you so much for joining. If you're returning, thank you so much for coming back. If you are listening on the podcast, bless you. Thank you so much for supporting that medium. If you want to hop over on YouTube, I've got a bit of a themed look going on. Some very intentional eye bags and a little bit of blood on my nose, fake blood. That probably looks way too red, but that is the only color of face paint I had. So here we are. Anyway, if you are supporting the podcast, thank you so much. Really appreciate you. Today, we have a impromptu horror movie review. Yes, we do. For those of you that don't know, I am a lover of horror films, especially those of the paranormal kind. So today I'm here to excitedly talk about a phenomenal horror movie that is based in a chilling true story, and we will get into all of that. So without further ado, we're talking about Veronica by Paco Plaza. This movie came out in 2017. I believe it is currently available on US Netflix. Those of you with VPNs, do your thing. Those of you that are in the US, check this out, like seriously. As far as I know, it's still on Netflix. And I will start with a bit of a spoiler-free review, okay? And wait a second, before I get into all that, I do feel the need to say, I recognize this movie is not recent or anything like that, but lately I was in a bit of a motivation slump, so I decided, because this movie would not leave my brain, that this would be a way to get out of it. So anyways, if you have seen Veronica, because it is not new, like I said, 2017, and you want to stick around, awesome. But if not, there will be spoilers, but for now, I will give you a spoiler-free review. It is very visceral, it is very sinister, and it is very terrifying. I do see reviews that say that it's like the most terrifying movie ever. It's not that, okay? I love horror, and it's not that things, like, I'm not saying it's not up there with probably one of the movies that made me feel the most scared that I've ever seen. But I'm not gonna like give it that title. I don't think I can give any movie that title, if that makes sense. But it is very visceral. It is quite sinister, and yes, it is terrifying. It is based on a true story, based in a Vallecas case in Spain. I'm sorry if I said that wrong. In Spain, based on, or rather, the case was around an 18-year-old girl named Stefania Gutierrez Lazaro. And she was the daughter of devout parents. I was only able to find her mother's name, Conspicion, and her father, I don't know his name, but Mr. Lazaro. And she used a Ouija board with friends and suffered horrific consequences. This is the true story this is based on. It expertly builds tension. This movie, honestly, that's why it's really terrifying. Paco Plaza does a phenomenal job of building the tension, and it definitely roots you in the characters, which is lovely, especially the character of Veronica, which we spend the most time with. It definitely leaves you very creeped out, and it definitely left me dying to look deeper into the inspirations of the film, such as Stefania's story. So that is my spoiler-free review. If you are a lover of horror, especially paranormal horror, I can almost guarantee you're gonna love this movie. So go check it out, and when you do that, come back to the spoilers. But if you're someone who doesn't care about spoilers, we've got spoilers from now on, because we're gonna get into a plot breakdown before we talk about it, you know? And I have my notes this time, so I'm not ranting forever during the plot breakdown. So here we go. So we open up on a police investigator, a Spanish police investigator, arriving at the scene, which is Veronica's apartment. And it is very tattered. Clearly something wrong went on there, and what the detective sees scars him. You can just see it on his face. Now, they do the little tropey thing where they don't show us what he's seeing yet, like they'll save that for the end. But you can clearly see like that actor did a phenomenal job of really showing us how what he saw was insane and very terrifying. So we're then taken to 3 days before this, where Veronica, played by Sandra Escacena, is shown as an extremely parentified older sister, as she's caring for her 3 siblings while her mom is passed out in bed. We later learn that she owns a bar, and, you know, clearly that's her business, that's the way she provides for her family, but unfortunately it also involves parentifying Veronica and making her feel rather isolated because her mom is quite literally never there. So at school, Veronica and Rosa, which is Veronica's childhood friend, and Diana, Rosa's new friend, that we'll see later, she kind of starts to replace Diana or Veronica with Diana, which is effed up because Veronica's gonna be going through some stuff, but we'll get there. So we have Veronica, Rosa, and Diana hosting a seance during a solar eclipse to connect with Diana's ex, who died in a motorcycle accident, and Veronica is also seeking to connect with her father, which she brings a picture of. Now, because we're kind of steered towards thinking that because Diana didn't bring any sort of memorabilia like a photo to the seance, that it was more potentially geared towards Veronica because she actually did have some sort of memorabilia. So that's worth mentioning. Also, this was prefaced by a lecture that one of the nuns was giving during what I imagine would be like a social studies class about ancient civilizations and how they would use the darkness of a solar eclipse in order to perform sacrifices of the human sort. So very creepy, definitely a little bit of foreshadowing going on. And so back to the seance, right? So we're all of this is going on, and these dumbass BITCHs decide that this solar eclipse is the best time. Now, okay, the logic, more potent energy, yada yada, but many wrongs. We'll get there. I mean, the whole thing is already wrong. Okay, don't see cancers from the dead, like already. Okay. During the seance, paranormal things happen, right? Like the Ouija board shakes. Veronica is seen getting purposely pricked by the shattered glass that they were using as the planchette and bleeding directly onto the board, and then essentially acting as if a dark energy entered her before whispering something ominous in Rosa's ear and then screaming. So all very creepy. A nun interrupts the seance and the board breaks in half all on its own. Horrible signs. Veronica is the only one pricked because the glass essentially, like the planchette, right? Because you can have the little like triangular planchette thing, but they didn't have one. They just had a glass, which I guess is pretty inventive. If I will give them that, quite resourceful. And the glass became hot to Rosa and Diana. So they like took their fingers off while Veronica kept her finger on until it shattered, causing it to like prick her finger. And that's how she ended up bleeding onto the board and ensuing all of that nonsense. So Veronica wakes at the nurse's office and is told she may be anemic and to eat more red meat. Okay, pretty harmless. Although we know it just happened. At home, while trying to eat a meatball, taking the nurse's, advice, she has her first sort of demonic trance, and she nearly chokes on her food, scaring her siblings, and it's actually one of her siblings dropping something that, rises her out of her trance. So Rosa avoids her, and seeking answers, she goes back to the basement of the school where the seance took place, and she finds Sister Death, Hermana Narcisa or Hermana Muerte, and actually there's a movie called Sister Death, and it's actually not half bad, it's pretty decent, and it's like a prequel to this one, not necessarily like about Veronica, but it's a prequel to this woman, Sister Death, who is quite interesting, I'll give him that. And so Sister Death reveals that Veronica has a dark entity attached to her from the seance. Now, Hermana tries to expel it unsuccessfully, then tells Veronica she has to close the door through which it came. So Veronica must use the board and say goodbye this time in hopes of banishing the darkness they brought through. So Veronica consults her occult magazines, which, again, so many wrongs. Like, do not seek answers from the dead. Like, the only way that you should be doing this is if you are paying a reputable medium who knows what they're doing, and they are literally guaranteed to only contact your loved one that's passed. Like, that's literally the only way this should be done. Like, people just willy-nilly seeking answers from the dead through Ouija boards, like, I cannot. Anyways. And these occult magazines, like, sure, great info, but, like, it's one thing to put in practice, like, a little money spell. It's another thing to literally try to contact the realm of the dead. Like, anyways. Okay, so she consults her little occult magazines, and she places these Viking protection sigils in the kids' rooms, in her little brother and sister's rooms. Which, by the way, that same night, the entity promptly destroys. So much good that day. Upon seeing the entities choking, so yeah, later on, we have another weird trance where she sees the entities choking her sister. And then she goes to stop them, only for Lucia to say that it was actually Veronica who was choking her, right? So maybe it wasn't actually like the entities physically. Maybe they've been possessing Veronica's body to do things. After a creepy dream and starting her period, kind of feeling like it's like induced by this stress from the dream, while cleaning the blood off her mattress, she finds black marks in the shape of a human body under her mattress and her siblings' mattresses as well. Very creepy. This also happened in the real life case. So Veronica goes to Rosa, who's throwing a party with Diana that she initially did not invite Veronica to. And Veronica begs her to do the seance again to help her say goodbye, right? To help her close the door. Veronica is very dysregulated emotionally and mentally, and she makes a little bit of a scene. So Diana has her kicked out, and Rosa doesn't really help her out, but she does reveal what Veronica whispered 3 days before, or not 3 days, 2 days before that. And that is that, so creepy. Okay, so basically Veronica, when she was whispering nonsense, and Rosa like came up to her ear to listen, she whispered that she herself, Veronica, would die on June 15th, which was 3 days from that day, right? So we're 2 days in. So desperate, she resolves to hold the seance with her siblings, her teeny tiny siblings. Like, you shouldn't hold it by yourself, but also like, really? Honestly though, this movie, the reason it's so good is because the choices she makes, unfortunately, like, you can totally understand why she's making those choices, and it's not a matter of, oh, I wouldn't make those choices. It's a matter of, man, would I be able to make better choices in her place? Because I don't know. Yeah, so she decides to hold the seance with her siblings. And she puts Antoinito, the youngest, who can't read, in charge of drawing protection sigils on the walls. And being a curious little child, he veers away from the protection sigils, the page, and finds invocation sigils. and starts to draw those. So many things go wrong in this movie. So many things go wrong. Oh my goodness. But you can totally understand why they're going wrong. That's why it's genius. Okay, let's keep going. Whew. All right. I literally say in my notes, oh no. Oh no. So due to this major faux pas, the spirit is essentially able to stay. And Veronica, unable to banish it, calls the police, bringing us to the cold open. So she gets her sisters, Irene and Lucia, outside, but is tricked by the entities to think that she also took her brother, which she didn't. So she's literally outside the door of the apartment building, or rather at the door, because once they go outside, they're locked out. And she realizes, she's like literally thinking she's holding Antonito, and then realizes she was in a sort of trance and she's not holding him. And so she puts Lucia and Irene outside, and she goes back to find Antonito. So she's expecting the police to arrive soon, right? So she leaves Lucia and Irene out there. So he ends up hiding in a closet, plugging his ears, calling out for Vero, which is her nickname, which is exactly what Veronica told him to do should anything happen. Now, when she comes up to him, he doesn't respond to her at all. And we see that it's because the entities have overwhelming control of her. So Antonito and little children tend to be shown in horror movies where paranormal things are happening to kind of be more privy to the spirit realm stuff going on. And this is no exception with Antonito. Like, we have, obviously I'm doing a plot breakdown here. I cannot tell you every detail, but we do have very creepy details where Antonito is seeing things that Veronica is also seeing, but that nobody else is seeing. And so in response to all this, knowing that he's privy to seeing these things, Veronica told him, go to the closet if something weird happens and just plug your ears and call out for me. Now, the saddest thing is that she finds him doing exactly that, but he's not responsive to her because she's effectively possessed. And being perceptive of those things, he knows that, and therefore he will not respond to her. Like, happy Antonito is listening and is protecting himself. Super sad for the predicament that Veronica is in now. So she realizes that it's been her harming her siblings all along, through several demonic trances where she would see things happening, and it turns out that it was her making them happen. The burning of the sigils, the choking of Lucia, all of it. There's this really sad moment where the water in the tub gets really hot, and I genuinely, that seems a little bit magical, but, and Antonito tells her it wasn't her, but he could also mean that he did see her reach across, but because he can perceive her when she's possessed and knows that it's not her, he was able to tell her that. Anyway, all very sad. So Veronica tries to take her own life in order to, keep herself from being fully possessed, but is stopped very creepily by the entity in charge, and it effectively enters her body, Ouija, Origin of Evil style. I effectively believe, because my boyfriend and I watched Ouija, Origin of Evil, the first Ouija, alright, decent. Nothing to write home about, though. The second one, really well done. Mike Flanagan, mwah. But it came out in 2016, and I 100% believe that he took inspiration from that possession scene and used it for this, because the entity essentially enters her body completely through her mouth, and it's this very creepy scene. There are photos of it on the internet. I will not put it here. I don't need this. I don't need you to see it, because it's one of those things that I watched this, because if it's one of those things that if you see it, you can't really unsee it. So yeah, very creepy. Her jaw, her mouth looks real weird while this is happening, and this is exactly what the detective sees. But he doesn't see the entity, he just sees this girl, this teenage girl, arms thrown back, creepy, you know, like backbend possession movie style, with an abnormally large mouth, like looking like she's in absolute agony. And then she collapses. Now, Antonito is safe, as are Irene and Lucia. Mom shows up, but unfortunately is too late. And as the detective inspects a photo of Veronica, it actively catches fire, like involuntarily, right in front of his face. And the fire, where it catches, is right in front of Veronica's face, like meaning, like, say there's a portrait of me, like this. For those of you on the podcast, I'm like doing the Vogue thing, so you can see like a box around my face. Picture like if the photo is of a person, in the middle of their face just suddenly starts to catch fire, like somebody like took a lighter and just lit fire to the photo so it would start to get engulfed. Like literally weird shit. This is a parallel to the true story too, which is, we will get there, but like, oh my goodness. So he receives a call on January 15th, sounds familiar, at about 2 a.m. confirming that Veronica indeed passed away. He composes his, quote, unexplainable, quote, report. And the movie ends with the photo being restored, the one that caught fire, and the title displayed on the screen. Whew. That, I am so proud of myself for condensing that plot, because there's so many details that I wish I could include, like Wheel of Time video style. But if I did absolutely every single one of my reviews like that, one, I wouldn't cease to enjoy watching movies because I'd be pausing every moment. And two, all of my reviews would just be way too long. So I'm really proud of that though, but this is definitely one of those movies that I could like do a watch through notes of this movie, and I would have like at least a couple pages, if not like 3 pages of notes, because this movie is genuinely, the detail that's put into it, the things that happen that lead to other things, or that lead you to theorize and think about other things that are happening, just brilliant, phenomenal. So now that we've gotten to the end of the plot, and by the time you get that title screen at the end too with the restored photo, you are just like, I was just distraught, honestly. So my thoughts on the movie, I really felt like it had strong characters. Like the siblings felt very real, Veronica felt very real, even Rosa and Diana. Like while Diana was kind of like the frivolous whatever friend, you also like, you definitely got this feeling of like, oh man, she's just a girl, and Rosa's just a girl, and Veronica's just a girl, and fuck, all this shit sucks so bad. And especially too because it's Diana's idea to invite Veronica to the house party, and I don't think she's doing it like as a mean joke in the moment. It genuinely seems like she just assumed Rosa would, and Rosa didn't, which sucks. That sucks, Rosa. But you can also kind of understand in the sense that like that was a really jarring thing for her to hear out of Veronica's mouth after she literally looked like she got possessed, and then proceeded to act super strange, right, for the next couple days, sort of thing. So even the mom, like, you do get the sense that she cares for her children. It's just one of those things where it's like, it's very difficult to be the sole breadwinner and make enough money and also ensure that your kids are taken care of when you aren't making enough money to get the help that you need, right? And I mean, that's why I don't need to get political here, but it's one of those things that I would really wish that like universal childcare was a thing in more places. Because it shouldn't be. As a childcare provider, it should not be a luxury. Like, if we want the human race to keep going, and while wealth distribution is just so insane, the least we could do is offer people universal childcare, like quality universal childcare. Anyway, getting off my soapbox here. Proper motivations, like, oh my goodness, this is, to me, this is what makes or breaks horror films. It is characters being properly motivated to make the choices that they're making. Like a movie that, oh man, I'm sure I'm gonna get so much flack for this, but I'm gonna say it because it's on my mind and it's just something that was so egregious to me. Midsommar, the movie Midsommar. I do enjoy Ari Aster typically. I do think he does like relationships insanely well. However, what Midsommar was missing for me was proper motivation. Because Danny and anybody in their right mind, as soon as, you know, that first alarming thing happened, y'all know what I'm talking about if you've seen this movie, they would be like, peace out. No. And then the subsequent things happened after that made me be like, what? It, like, again, as I mentioned earlier, it wasn't a matter of, like, in this movie, like, oh man, this choice sucks, but man, it kind of feels like the only one. No! It's more like, okay, who would do that? Like, please tell, like, educate me on the demographic of people who would do that. So, for me, proper motivation makes or breaks a horror film. For characters to do things because they are properly motivated to do so. Movies like Talk to Me are great examples of that. Movies like Veronica are great examples of that. If your motivations are properly set, then any outrageous choice you make in a horror movie is going to add tension instead of deflate it. So, well done, Paco Plaza. That was awesome. The eerie paranormal depictions of things, like, again, mwah, amazing, loved it. Well done, just well done. The chilling ending and even more chilling inspiration that is the true story, which we are about to get into. Whew, okay. Are y'all ready for this? Very creepy. Very creepy, and the most creepy part of this story is that it is immortalized in the police records of Spain, of Madrid, Spain. Yes. They have an archive of records, and somewhere in those records is the story of Stefania Gutierrez Lazaro. So, in 1991, in Madrid, Stefania Lazaro and two friends hosted a seance to contact her friend's late boyfriend in the bathroom of their Catholic school. Now, Stefania was also apparently seeking to contact her late grandfather, which we learned from the family that he allegedly was not a very kind man, and apparently in the articles that I read, which you can totally find online. I'm so sorry I didn't compile sources for this one. I probably should have, but literally if you just type in like the true story of Veronica, you'll find essentially a lot of the same information. That's probably why I didn't cite sources, because most of the articles that I found just gave me the same information, just like recycled. But essentially, across a couple articles, if not like all the ones that I read, that really went into Stefania's family, it was said that on his deathbed, her grandfather said something along the lines of, if I don't harm you in this life, I will harm you in the next. So, already messing with a Ouija board, horrible idea. Trying to contact a spirit that had this much hatred in his heart for his own family, his own grandchild before he passed, oof, definitely not advisable. So a nun interrupted the seance, and the friends claim that as the nun snapped the board, cardinal mistake, I'll explain in a second, a strange smoke, quote, gathered in the glass being used as the planchette. And they say that they saw Stefania inhale the smoke. Ooh, this is all real life, y'all. This is all real life. Okay, so why is it a cardinal sin to snap the board? For this video, I also did a bit of research into some channels that have a little bit more of an occult niche going on, and across one of the channels that I found, I'm gonna have to go deep in my history for this. I'm gonna have to try to find her name. I'll try to find her name and link her down below, but she in her Veronica review, she talked about how across her occult studies and things, she's read here and there that snapping the board is a terrible idea. Like breaking a Ouija board is like not a good idea, because supposedly you can like free all of the entities that were previously connected through the board. Almost like shattering a crystal ball, right? That you've connected through lots of entities through. Yeah, sort of like irrevocably opening that door, right? Like, how do you close that door now that you broke the door? So the way, in my opinion, would be to do like a ceremonial burning of it. But if that nun was intelligent, she would have just confiscated it. She would have told them to say goodbye and confiscate it, I should say. Because that is something that the movie Ouija got right, is that you always say goodbye. I mean, I'm over here, PSA, just don't use the things, okay? Don't own them, don't display them, just don't even use them. Seriously. But if you do, if you're that much of a silly goose, always say goodbye, please. And cast protection. Yeah. Anyhow. Like giving these like pieces of advice so begrudgingly, because you really just shouldn't be doing this, period. Okay. Mysterious smoke, not doing good. Shattered board, not doing, or what is it? Snapped board, not doing good. So now, instead of 3 days, the horrific things that occurred to Stephania happened across 6 months. So the 6 months following this seance, Stephania would experience seizures, like unexplained seizures, voices, hearing voices, and being followed by, quote, evil, quote, forces. Stephania had 15 to 20 minute trances in which she would occasionally harm her siblings. There were 5 of them. And there was reported to be scratches along her furniture and walls. Now, when confronted post-trance, she wasn't sure of her motivations, and she couldn't explain the happenings. Her parents did take her to a lot of doctors and a lot of like specialists to see if she had like epilepsy or something, and supposedly they didn't find anything. Now, it is fair to say that there was, psychologically, it seemed like there was a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress in the household. I mean, you can imagine if what the family members said, that the grandfather said on the deathbed, is true. That is definitely a lot of generational trauma under one household. And that has to be difficult to deal with, especially in a time where the term generational trauma isn't even really a thing. So I'm not, all I'm saying is that, to me, that doesn't necessarily disprove the fact that it definitely appears to me to be possession. I believe that that is what happened to her. However, it doesn't disprove that, for me personally, I should say. For me personally, that nugget of information doesn't disprove the possession theory, but rather kind of strengthens it in a way, because from my basic witchy understanding, entities of that sort function at a very low vibrational level. I know I'm using some New Agey terms. It really sucks that the New Age movement kind of blows and has kind of, like, I don't know, perverted all these terms, if I can say this. But vibrations in the way of, like, emotions hold vibrations, like joy and gratitude hold like some of the most beautiful, I'm like wiping my blood away on accident, some of the most beautiful, highest vibrations. That's, where theoretically you could say like the angels live, the spirit guides, like the beings of light, right? If you believe in that sort of thing, God, like they live at that highest vibration. And then you could say that the demonic entities, those kinds of things live on the opposite end of that, where fear and despair and extreme loneliness, extreme scarcity, and I say extreme because extreme, it's a big, big, big chasm here in between. And the closer someone, like in the stories that I watch, that I see, you know, horror movies, a lot of the time it is not the happy-go-lucky person who gets possessed. Like, especially if the movie is doing it well and is giving proper motivation, all of that. Like, Talk to Me is a great example. Like, Mia is susceptible because she's grieving her mom, right? Because she's so confused, because she doesn't have any answers. She's seeking answers, and she goes seeking in the wrong place. So the theories surrounding, like, or not the theories, the fact or the allegations that there was also anxiety and other things going on in the home, to me personally, contributes to the fact that she was probably really susceptible to this possession, and that ended up going on. Oh, so where were we? Yes, so like I said, Conspicion and her father took Estefania to countless doctors who could not explain what was going on. And then one night, Estefania went into a coma and passed out from, quote, suspicious causes, quote. That's what the hospital staff wrote. Months past Stefania's passing, the Lazaros still experienced paranormal activity and called the police. Oh, I should go back and say, the suspicious causes, the doctor said that it seemed like she was asphyxiated, but like, how? If you're in a coma, like, I imagine you have a ventilator. You know, they're positive that nobody went in there and like choked her. So very suspicious, very weird. But yes, months past her passing, they were still experiencing paranormal activity, and it got so severe one night that they just called the police. Now, Conspicion claimed, this all started when Conspicion claimed to feel something pressing down on her chest. And after several hours of paranormal activity, her husband decided that he needed to call the police. So I don't know what he was thinking, but also, like, I wouldn't know what to do either. I could totally see that. Yeah. And several hours. Like, oh my goodness. So an officer asked him to pass the phone to the family members, basically so they could corroborate the story. Valid. They all, or I should say, the police officers obviously like thought that Stefania's father must have been, you know, under the influence of something, or maybe unwell. But once the entire family vouched for him, 3 officers / investigators were sent to the house or the apartment. Now, one investigator was Jose Pedro Negri, he was the chief of National Police. Him and his fellow officers witnessed, on record, loud, unidentifiable noises coming from empty areas of the house. A wardrobe violently swinging its doors open in an unnatural way, quote, with no one inside it. A Jesus figurine being torn from its crucifix. Large brown stains, I told you about this earlier with the parallel in the movie. Large brown stains appearing in random places in the house, including under beds. Report contained the words, quote, mysterious and rare, quote, referring to odd happenings, stated that they indeed experienced, quote, paranormal activity, quote. Now, this is all insane. Also, I believe the burnt photo was something that was also in the real life story, where her face caught fire in the middle. Now, the family moved eventually. I believe it was like they endured this for like a 1.5 to 2 years, I think. And then they moved and the activity stopped, and supposedly future residents don't claim to have experienced any activity, so that's good. But overall, like, that story blew my mind. Because while I am a believer of all of these things, I believe I've been a little witch for as long, like, I was a little witch before I was a witch now, you know? Like, I have always been someone who's very sensitive to the other parts of the electromagnetic spectrum that is not visible light. That are not visible light, I should say. And when it like gives me a morbid sort of excitement when stories as crazy as this have concrete proof for existing, being this police report. Now, a little bit of information that I gathered through my findings that I didn't quite know where to put here, so I'll just tack them on at the end here, is that, like, I did find a video about Stefania's story that included footage of when they had, like, a psychic come to the house, and the psychic was saying that there was, like, an angry spirit in one of a little girl, and the little girl was okay, but she was trying to protect the family from something. All very strange. The mother claimed that she would hear like a little girl call out for her, like calling for her mom. They claimed that they would hear like menacing old man laughter, like all very strange things when you tie it into the other information. And again, like the things in the police report, completely concrete. The things that Stefania's family said, like, I don't know. We weren't there to experience it, right? But the fact that these police officers experienced these things, I just have to believe that the things that her family were saying are rooted in truth some way, somehow. And what happened to this girl is just completely mind-boggling. Like, literally, we say a prayer for Stefania Gutierrez Lazaro, and we say a prayer for her family. Now, back with our critical thinking movie hats. How does Veronica compare to Stefania's and her family's story? Obviously, as a movie, it's an adaptation of the true events, and it takes large inspiration from the police report itself and looser inspiration from Stefania's stories, though there are some very clear, concrete parallels. So let's go through those. So the basic facts of the story line up fairly well. Get into it. The seance to connect with the friend's boyfriend that died in a motorcycle accident, that is a parallel to real life. The interrupted seance and the broken board, even though the board didn't end up being broken by the nun, it did still break on its own, so we still kind of have the same perceived consequences of like, unleashing lots more spirits than just the one that just got connected to, right? The paranormal activity in the seance, albeit it was just the freaky smoke in real life, whereas like in the movie there was, things shaking and things like that. And of course, like Veronica acting super insane. The hauntings that included Veronica/Stefania harming the siblings, like that was a parallel, right? Stefania going to trances where she would unknowingly harm her siblings. Veronica saw a lot of what Stefania described, like the way that they depict the entities in the movie supposedly are a lot like what the family said that Stefania was saying she was seeing. Veronica dies from unexplained causes post the time of the haunting, 3 days. In real life, it was 6 months, right? But it did seem to be due to the haunting, and it did kind of seem to be in a sense that it was like when she went into that coma, it was almost like the spirits fully kind of like got a hold of her body sort of thing. They both include the police experiencing, quote, unexplainable, quote, events. So these basic facts line up pretty decently, right? Let's look at the differences. So Veronica is 15 while Stefania was 18 when this happened. Veronica's home life is her being very parentified, caring for her family. But Stefania had 2 very concerned parents and 5 siblings, whereas Veronica had 3. Stefania's grandpa, we mentioned this. We'll mention it again here briefly. It is said by the family, apparently told Stefania on her deathbed that, quote, if I don't harm you in this life, I will harm you in the next, quote, oof, oof. So, lots of generational trauma there. Oh yeah, and then here I just mentioned that it is very strange that when you read about how part of the hauntings experienced by the Lazaros included an old man laughing and a little girl calling out to her mom, it just kind of makes you think a little bit, right? The grandfather and whatnot. Yeah, so like I would say like for me, those are like the major things that stood out as differences from the real life story. But overall, I thought it was adapted really well. I thought it was done really well. Like, this movie really, just really well. That brings me to, I should say, done really well. That brings me to my final thoughts. Now, it's fair to say, reports later, see, I get ahead of myself in my videos sometimes. Oh my goodness. So yes, like I did mention earlier, it's fair to say that, you know, it did say that Stefania did show signs of anxiety in her home life, needing a lot of attention in, like, that emotional, in that emotional regulation and health sort of way. But nothing that appeared to warrant her, like, just completely rapidly declining health, right? Like, as someone who experienced CPTSD, not necessarily from things that a lot of people would consider, like, outright trauma, but just more things along the lines of, like, emotional neglect and just having, you know, I mean, I guess I could say, actually, yeah, I mean, emotional abuse is abuse, and I do have CPTSD from it, but, you know, my anxiety and all of those things, like, it's something that I've learned to cope in my daily life, but it took a long time for it to catch up with me, right? It wouldn't just, like, having anxiety in your home, needing generational trauma to be addressed, like needing emotional regulation to be more of a thing, needing relationship dynamics to be healthier, all of those things are needed, but they're not necessarily gonna, like, really screw a person until later in life. And even then, it's going to, like, mess with you mentally, emotionally, before it ever reaches something like manifesting physically in your body. So while those things, like I mentioned earlier, could be true, and to me it definitely seems like that's the case, it doesn't explain the insanely rapid decline of over 6 months that happened to Stefania. And in my opinion, like I said earlier, it only, for me, adds to the lore that she was just a very vulnerable person. And unfortunately, when you are at those lower, extreme lower vibrations of fear, despair, loneliness, and you find energies that align with that, it's essentially like a like attracts like sort of thing. So she was just, like, in a primed position, unfortunately, for what happened to her. Veronica and Stefania were both brought up Catholic, and they dabbled in the occult with little to no education and guidance. This is such a key thing. And whenever I watch, like, paranormal horror movies that are based in people meddling in the occult, just willy-nilly, without guidance, without awareness, and definitely, like, seldom for any good reason. Like, I'm not saying that there's ever really a good reason for seeking answers from the dead, but like I said, if you do think you have a good reason, then seek out a reputable medium whom is going to guarantee that you only talk to the person that you are seeking to talk to. Like, don't do it on your own. And that's where, in my opinion, the Catholic upbringing kind of fails them. Because I'm not saying that just because you are Catholic or Christian or religious of any sort, that you can't be educated in the occult to a degree of just being able to be wise about it, you know, be able to protect yourself and just abstain in general because you know better. Like, that can exist, right? I'm sure that there are a lot of religious people who understand the occult enough to be mindful of it, to be respectful of it, instead of to just, like, pretend that it doesn't exist. It's when we pretend that something doesn't exist that it can come back to bite us in the ass. Like suppressed emotions, right? We pretend that we never feel angry, and then we are the ones that ends up snapping angrily at people that we love. Why? Because that anger is not being seen. It's getting shoved to the side. Unfortunately, I've seen this a lot in, you know, fundamentalist religious people, that they are so much about their God and the light that he brings, that to them, like, the opposite side of that, just they pretend like it's not there. And while that's fine, and most people, that's never going to be an issue really in their life, when it comes to having children, and if your children are interested in things like you see that they have occult magazines, things like that, it is so important to teach them that, hey, we can read about these things, we can learn about these things, but we don't put these things in practice. Like, if you want to put these things in practice responsibly when you are an adult and you have the proper tools and guidance, that's one thing. But while we're just developing and learning things, that is all we're gonna do about this. We're just gonna learn. You wanna do a spell? Fun. We'll do a little money spell, right? We'll do a little abundance spell. We'll do a little like home cleansing spell. We are not gonna talk to the dead or mess with anything that has to do with other spiritual realms that we have no business being like messing with. But that's the thing, when all of your spiritual education only has a foundation in room for God, and God only, and demons bad, you're not actually educating on why the demons are bad, right? And I'm not saying, like, listen, I have been a childcare provider for over 10 years. There are age-appropriate ways to explain things. And if a child is old enough to be reading occult magazines, they are definitely old enough for you to have a conversation as to why these occult magazines are for educational purposes only and not practical, okay? Like, it's one thing to draw a little protection sigil. It's another thing to get a Ouija board and do a seance. So both Veronica and Stephania came from like highly devout. I mean, it didn't seem like her mom necessarily was super devout, but obviously she went to a Catholic school. That presence was there. Stephania actually did have very devout parents. So that kind of blinders, those kinds of blinders that get put on to the occult, because it's like, oh, don't touch that. If you touch that, you're ruined. And it's like, no, like, as long as you're just learning about it, there's no ruin. Knowledge is power, okay? I don't care what you say about Eve. I don't care what you say about the goddamn apple. In my opinion, she should have fucking eaten it, because guess what? If Eden was just gonna be a bunch of ignorant people, like, what are we doing for the world? The apple represents knowledge, and as far as I'm concerned, knowledge is power, especially when it comes to things like this that we can't really see, some of us can, but that we can't really see. Some of us, like myself, can feel them, but I can't see it, right? Most of us aren't even though they could perceive these things if they probably train themselves to, not aware to it, which is totally fine. There is a reason that we have mental filters to our reality. There's a reason that we only see the visible light spectrum. Probably because if we saw the entire electromagnetic spectrum, it would be really fucking overwhelming, okay? So, when it comes to the things that there are ample anecdotes and stories out in the world of paranormal shit really truly happening to at least make me believe that there's something going on there. And when it comes to things, back to my original statement, when it comes to things that we can't really see, that we can't fully explain, but that they seem to really be there, the only thing we can do is equip ourselves with knowledge about said things. So that when a friend asks us, hey, do you want to hold a seance with me with a Ouija board? You can say, no thanks. The only way I'm ever contacting the dead is if I have a very specific question for someone that I love, that I care for, that passed away, and I will go through a reputable medium to do that for me. No thank you, get that away from me. That is a portal to things we do not understand, and we don't mess with that, okay? Basically, like I just told you, devout people, usually fundamentalists, tend to avoid the occult at all costs, even to the point of not educating themselves for protection's sake, which can sometimes have the opposite effect should someone they know mess with things that they don't understand and shouldn't be messing with, okay? Just a much more eloquent way of telling you what I just ranted about. Now, if these girls had a trusted adult who would explain to them why this wasn't and will never be a good idea, they may have actually stood a chance. Also, they needed someone to listen and help with their tough feelings, because they seem to have turned to the board for answers they couldn't find from anyone. So we don't seek answers from the dead, we grieve the dead, okay? Pro-witch tip. Now, there is something to be said too, like, I understand that to some little kids and probably even some adults messing with a Ouija board is a game, right? Like, it's a game. Like, it's hysterical. After the movie Ouija, like at the end credits, they'll be like, based on a Hasbro game. And I'm just like, I am certain Hasbro did not create spirit boards. Maybe they patented it, but they didn't create one, okay? Maybe they created the Ouija board, but no, not spirit boards. But regardless, like, even with this frivolous kind of like lens on it, it is not a game, all right? It's not a game. And for the most part, people who really do believe in things like this, when they're looking for answers in something like this, it's because they really like need someone to be there for them, right? Maybe they're grieving. They're probably grieving. Maybe they're experiencing things that they don't understand. Maybe they're a little bit sensitive, a little bit, you know, psychic, medium-like, I should say. Regardless, they need a trusted ear and guidance in their life, not to seek answers from the dead. So with these girls, it would have been really cool if they had someone to help them through their grieving process, so this seance didn't have to be a part of it, both in real life and in the movie. Now, for my final thoughts, amazing movie, and especially horrifying true story. Again, gives me a morbid excitement that it is immortalized in the police reports of Madrid. The grand lesson here is, unless you're one of those people who is meant to and prepared to do so, please leave the spirit world alone. Okay? Thank you. Thank you so much. Wow, okay. That was fun. You bet your booty I did a protection spell before I started talking about this. That's just me. I curate a very homey space, a very loving space, and when talking about really, really scary things like this, it's one thing for me to talk about like a fictional movie, but when talking about these real events, I just want to make sure that I, cross my T's and dot my I's. So, for those of you that are wondering, I did this in a lovely space, and we are divinely protected, if any of you care to know that. So, anyways, if you've made it to this point of the video, thank you so much. I would love it if you'd consider liking this video, if you consider subscribing to the channel, and even clicking that bell, because I do post regularly, but I don't post on a schedule, and I've been doing a lot of trailer reactions lately, so those kind of pop out of nowhere. So the bell is really helpful if you want to do that. Also, I have been doing a fun little thing called Karaoke Knockout. It is this competition where I'm essentially competing like via an online voting process to be in the top 8 to compete live in LA to do like a live karaoke contest. So I've already pledged that if that is the case, that I make it into this karaoke contest, the live version of it, I should say, that I will be giving you a vlog from that day. I'll be giving you however much content I can from that day, and that's going to be really fun. So if that is something you are interested in doing and helping me do, you can go to my channel page, you can go to my link tree, it is the first link there, and you can vote for me, and I would really, really, truly appreciate that. Thank you so much. Thank you. Also, I've been doing this thing where I ask you to comment an emoji if you've made it this far, and for this one, just do any of the emojis that look terrified, okay? It could be the one that's like, it could be the one that's, like genuinely, truly terrified. I mean, I don't care. Just give me one that represents being terrified to you. Okay? Okay. Also, you can find me on social media. I'm at Embodying Mystical Mac. I do have a TikTok, but who knows how long that'll last, right? But I am pretty active on Instagram, so you can go ahead and find me on Instagram. Yeah. And you can find my music account at Mac and the Music on Instagram as well, on TikTok as well, although you'll find all my mini covers on Instagram while I'm making my music. And when it's ready to release, that'll be the first place that I announce it. So, yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Lastly, feel free to check out my affiliate links below. You can also see the instructions to book a tarot reading as I do that. And yeah, I really appreciate you being here. this movie genuinely like lit a fire under my butt because I just love it when horror movies are done right, and Paco Plaza, like, you did really well. I liked Sister Death as well, so if you feel like checking that out, check that out. It's, in my opinion, it's nearly not as creepy because of the true story behind this just makes this so much creepier, but it's a really good movie in my opinion as far as horror movies go. Kept me entertained, proper motivations, I think maybe aside from like 1 or 2 moments, but otherwise, yeah. Anyway, at this point I'm doing the ADHD thing where I'm like really have to go to the bathroom, but I'm stalling this video, so stay mystical, stay grounded. Please, unless you are highly educated in the matter, do not mess with the spirit world, and I will catch you next time. Mwah!